Chapter 120, Clash of Rank B Jutsus. The trio immediately began moving. Fujin asked, "Are you guys injured?" Both shook their heads. Neither of them had taken any injury. Hoka smirked and replied, "My opponent never dared to get close to me." Miko answered, "Mine maintained distance and fought defensively as well. He was just stalling for time." Fujin looked at them and said, "That's good. But your chakra level seems very low." Both sighed and nodded. Miko's chakra had dropped to just 20%. Hoka had about 45% chakra left. By comparison, Fujin had 60% chakra remaining. If Renjiro's clone made his enemy waste chakra, then Fujin's chakra level could be higher than his. Fujin said, "You guys don't use chakra much. Hoka, you fight at close distance. Miko, you provide shuriken support. And save your chakra if we decide to use a combination jutsu. I'll provide ninjutsu support. Sensei's clone can provide backup for us." Hoka immediately agreed, "All right." He got to fight with taijutsu, which was all that mattered to him. Miko also reluctantly agreed. She didn't have much chakra left to perform ninjutsu. And in terms of taijutsu, both Hoka and Fujin were superior to her. The trio soon reached the place where Renjiro's shadow clone and Mimizu Yajunji were fighting. They hid in the woods and observed the situation. The entire battlefield was a mess. There were hundreds of earth spears spread throughout the battlefield. The rock spikes and thorns seemed to be countless. Multiple rock shields and earth walls were also on the battlefield. Renjiro's clone and Mimizu Yajunji were standing around 100 meters from each other. Junji had one earth wall in front of him and a couple of rock shields to his right and left. Junji was frowning. He analyzed, "In the last 15 minutes, I have tried everything I could do to dispel the clone, but he managed to defend every time. I tried making water and earth clones to help others, but he intercepted them all. Every single clone of mine was caught off guard and dispelled. And his clone doesn't seem to be running short on chakra. Do I have to wait until someone comes to help me?" He looked at Renjiro's clone and sighed, "This is so embarrassing. I hope my lil bro isn't the one who comes to my aid." Anyways, 3 of the enemies were kids. They should be dealt with soon. Renjiro's clone kept a watch, thinking, he hasn't made a move for over a minute. Has he given up on creating a breakthrough and is waiting for others? Renjiro's clone analyzed and shrugged, "Whatever. This deadlock is in my favor. Once my main body wins, we will sweep through the battlefield." The trio of Fujin, Miko, and Hoka watched stealthily. Miko frowned, "Why aren't they fighting?" Hoka said, "They seem to be in a standoff. I guess both are trying to save chakra." Fujin also frowned, "Sneak attacking will be tougher if he isn't fighting." Hoka asked, "How will we sneak attack?" Fujin replied, "There is no good way. Let me try." Fujin made a few hand signs and created a vacuum bullet core in his mouth. Hoka and Miko flickered and moved away from Fujin. Fujin looked at Junji, but there was no movement from him. Not having any other choice, he used his jutsu. Vacuum bullet jutsu. When Fujin fired his vacuum bullet jutsu, despite not sensing anything, Junji became very alert. He instantly moved behind a couple of steps. Unlike his brother and Danjiro, Junji was an elite. He had fought throughout the Third Great Ninja War and was promoted to Jounin due to his achievements. Despite not seeing Fujin's attack, he still dodged it. The vacuum bullet hit the rock shield on his right, penetrated through it, passed a foot away from the front of Junji's chest and then penetrated through another rock shield. Fujin flickered to a different spot while frowning. I need to learn how to make multiple vacuum cores. He'd have been dead if I could have created 4 to 5 vacuum bullets. The attack caught the attention of both Junji and Renjiro. They both looked at where the attack came from. Renjiro smiled. On the other hand, Junji's face was grim. The penetrative power of the attack was too high. He observed where the attack came from, but no one was there. Miko looked at the opponent and said, "Looks like a sneak attack won't work." Hoka nodded and replied, "We will have to attack from the front." Junji thought, such a strong attack. Did Konoha's reinforcements arrive so quickly? I need to win quickly or others will be defeated if they have to fight multiple enemies. Junji made a few hand signs. Renjiro's clone smiled and made hand signs as well and slammed his hands on the ground. Water release, exploding water colliding wave jutsu. Earth release, earth dragon blast jutsu. Junji used exploding water colliding wave jutsu on the forest to his right. A huge water wave appeared and crushed down towards the forest. At the same time, the ground began shaking. A large, bronze dragon head appeared out of the ground and roared. Behind the head was its long stone body. It dived down underground once again and moved towards Junji. Miko and Hoka, who were together, watched with grim faces as a huge water wave approached them. They both readied themselves to flicker backwards. Fujin watched as the huge water wave approached him. Knowing that Miko and Hoka won't be able to defend, he made a few hand signs as well. Wind release, infinite breakthrough jutsu. He blew out intense winds that clashed with the huge water wave. The water wave was stopped. Water began dispersing through the strong winds and rained down harmlessly. Some water still passed through the winds, but it wasn't much and passed through the forest while the trio were on the trees. The clash happened on a wild scale. Both Renjiro and Kazuki noticed it. Renjiro observed and thought, is Fujin teaming up with my clone? Though Renjiro could use wind jutsus as well, he rarely used them in combat. Against a water jutsu, he would always use earth jutsus. Kazuki observed with a grim face, did a strong wind affinity ninja from Konoha arrive to reinforce? Or is it that brat who used the great breakthrough jutsu? What the hell are Junji and others doing? How long do they need to defeat one clone, 3 kids, and 1 Inyazuka? Junji watched with a grim face, my jutsu was countered so easily. Sensing the earth dragon approaching him, Junji immediately moved away. However, Renjiro's clone controlled the earth dragon to follow Junji. Miko and Hoka observed the situation with their Kekii Genkais. Hoka sighed and said, how will I fight in close range if they use such huge jutsus? Fujin concentrated chakra in his eyes to carefully observe the earth dragon chasing Junji. He analyzed, if he defends Renjiro's attack, I might get another shot. Fujin quickly made a few hand signs and prepared another vacuum bullet core. Though Junji was moving rapidly, the earth dragon was faster. Understanding that he can't dodge, he created a hand sign and slammed his hands on the ground. Earth release, rocky ground barrier jutsu. The ground under Junji immediately began hardening. In addition, a rock dome appeared around him and surrounded him. The earth dragon clashed with the hard rocky ground and was stopped. Having no way to proceed ahead, it exploded. Junji desperately poured his chakra into the ground to strengthen his defenses. Fujin, who was observing carefully, suddenly noticed an opportunity. He immediately fired his vacuum bullet at Junji. Junji was in a very tough spot. Chapter 121, Desperate Defense. The earth dragon's explosion sent cracks through the hardened rock. But the ground also absorbed the impact of the blast. so the rock dome stayed intact. However, at the next moment, a vacuum bullet hit the rock dome and penetrated it. Junji, who was pouring his chakra into the rock dome, immediately noticed it and moved to his right. He was always on alert for another sneak attack. However, he didn't have much time to move. Though he dodged, the bullet created a deep cut in his upper left arm as it passed. Junji winced, but he had no time to worry about the pain. While dodging the vacuum bullet, he couldn't supply chakra to the rock dome anymore. Renjiro's clone noticed it and slammed his hands on the ground again. Earth Release, Earth Flow Divide Jutsu. The ground under the rock dome immediately began splitting apart. Realizing the danger, Junji created an opening in his rock dome and moved out. The ground under the rock dome kept splitting apart. It split for 10 meters when the entire rock dome collapsed inside it. As soon as Junji moved out, a vacuum bullet and an earth spear attacked him. But he managed to dodge them both. Fujin concluded, looks like killing him with a long-range attack is not possible. Fujin and Renjiro's clone weren't the only ones who targeted Junji as soon as he left the dome. Hoka and Miko also got into action. They flickered in front of him. Miko immediately threw a few shurikens, while Hoka ran forward to block his chakra points. Junji immediately dodged the shurikens. Hoka used that opportunity to close the distance between them and attack him. Junji blocked Hoka's attacks while analyzing, how did these brats get here? Did they defeat Archanins? Or did they get reinforcements who freed them up? I am getting worried about Doi. I need to break free quickly. Junji had his back against the wall. Realizing that he would not be able to break free by staying on defense, he decided to go on the attack. He started with Hoka, who was fighting him. Unfortunately for him, the enemy's attack was too intense. He tried to gain an advantage against Hoka, but Hoka's taijutsu was as good as his. Additionally, he had to keep an eye out for Miko's shurikens, Fujin's vacuum bullets and Renjiro's long-range jutsus. With Hoka fighting in close range, vacuum bullet became too dangerous to use. While it did apply pressure on Junji, Fujin concluded that it won't create much of an effect. So Fujin flickered and joined Miko and Hoka as well. Junji noticed Fujin and thought, so it was him. Looks like there are no reinforcements. But does this mean that all three of them won their fights? His face grew grim as he concluded, we underestimated them. This mission is now a total disaster. Fujin stayed behind Hoka and made a few hand signs. Junji kept a close eye on Fujin. Renjiro's clone observed his students and analyzed, all three of them are here. So all four of the enemy Chunins should be dead. He smiled, I never thought that I would be the slowest to deal with my opponents. My main body seems to still be in a deadlock. Renjiro's clone stayed behind and just observed his students. Just his presence alone created a lot of pressure on Junji. He wanted his students to get the experience of fighting against an experienced Chunin. After all, missions tend to go bad frequently. The next time, he wouldn't be around to keep an eye on them. Hoka kept engaging Junji in hand-to-hand combat. Miko used her shurikens to make openings for Hoka, while Fujin used his air bullets to not allow Junji any retreat. Junji's expression was grim, these brats are strong. Three of them together can take me on. And they aren't allowing me any opportunity to use any ninjutsu. And that clone is still staring at me. But with these brats here, he won't use any large-scale ninjutsu. But, I need to save some chakra to deal with the clone and to escape. And I still have to check on Doi. Though a lot of thoughts were running through Junji's mind, they didn't affect his combat. The fight remained in a deadlock for the next 5 minutes. During these 5 minutes, Junji gave multiple opportunities for Fujin and Miko to jump into close combat. However, all those openings were traps. Neither Fujin nor Miko jumped in and stayed behind Hoka and provided mid-range support. Junji's situation kept getting worse. Though he wasn't seriously injured, he had a lot of close calls. There were a lot of small cuts on his body. It was only a matter of time before one attack hit him fatally. Even more pressing was that his chakra was decreasing. And Renjiro's clone was observing him carefully. Understanding that maintaining the situation would be unfavorable for him, he decided to go on the attack. As Junji decided, a shuriken came flying at him. He tilted his head and avoided it. Right after, Hoka attacked with his gentle fist style. Junji began moving backwards to avoid Hoka. However, 2 air bullets were shot behind him and one was directed at him. Not having any opportunity to use any ninjutsu to defend, Junji had to move forward towards Hoka to avoid the bullets. Hoka aimed his palm at Junji's chest. Junji used his left hand to deflect Hoka's attack by hitting him on his wrist. Junji followed it up with a strong kick with his right leg targeting Hoka's left side. Hoka blocked the kick with his left forearm. However, the force of that kick sent Hoka to his right for a few meters. Junji immediately ignored Hoka and moved towards Fujin and Miko thinking, these kids didn't attack even when I provided openings. So their taijutsu must be weak. Seeing Junji run towards him, Fujin's eyes widened. He shouted, crap, and immediately ran to his left leaving Miko alone to face him. Seeing one of the 2 kids run away, Junji smirked. He thought, as I thought. They were both hiding behind that Hyuga brat. So they specialize in mid and long range combat and are bad at taijutsu. I'll kill this girl before that Hyuga brat comes to her help and then kill the one who ran away as well. Miko scoffed internally at Fujin's antics. She threw the shurikens in her hands at Junji and grabbed a kunao. Junji dodged the shurikens and grabbed his own kunao and attacked Miko. Miko blocked his kunao with her own and kicked his abdomen almost at the same time. Junji was shocked, she isn't bad at taijutsu. At that moment, Hoka began running towards him from his rear while Miko attacked from the front. Junji's face grew grim as he grabbed another kunao. He blocked Miko's attacks and was about to look at Hoka when he suddenly felt something on his right. He looked to see that the kid who ran away was attacking him with a sword. Fujin attacked him as if he wanted to cut his body vertically in 2. Realizing the danger, he increased the force on the kunao that was blocking Miko and sent her flying backwards. Almost immediately, he raised the kunao in his other hand to block the sword and sent a kick at Hoka who was just behind him. The sword clashed with the kunao and the kick met 2 outstretched fingers. Junji grunted as he felt Hoka disabling a chakra point in his feet. However, soon his eyes widened as he saw the sword cutting through his kunao and coming down at his head. He pushed his feet on Hoka's fingers and used them to jump away from him so that he could dodge the sword. His body began moving towards Fujin's right. The sword, which was aimed at the center of Junji's head, barely missed it. However, it hit him on the shoulder and severed his right arm. Fujin looked at his opponent in surprise. He used Hoka's attack to propel himself away from my sword swing. It's incredible that he is still alive. Hoka and Miko was surprised as well that Fujin didn't manage to kill him. However, all 3 instantly attacked him once again. Hoka moved around Fujin's sword to attack Junji. Fujin too moved towards him and swung his sword again at Junji. Junji, who had landed just 2 feet away from Fujin, was in shock. His right arm was severed and his right foot hurt. He looked at Fujin's sword fearfully and moved backwards while grunting in pain. However, Miko was right behind him and stabbed a kunao in his back. Blood came out of Junji's mouth as he stopped himself and swung his left fist behind himself to hit Miko. However, both Hoka and Fujin had reached him. Fujin stabbed his sword into Junji's heart while Hoka jabbed his 2 fingers into Junji's throat. Junji looked at Hoka and Fujin in disbelief. When he entered the land of fire, he never thought that he'd be killed by ninjas 1/3 his age. Mimizuya Junji, a veteran jounin of the village hidden in the mist, fell in battle. Chapter 122, The Hiding Spot. Seeing Junji breathe his last breath, Fujin withdrew his sword and said, "He was tough." Hoka and Miko also withdrew their attacks and nodded. Junji's body fell to the ground. Hoka said, "Yes. For so long, despite getting attacked so much, he never allowed me to hit any of his chakra points." Miko nodded. She was about to say something when her eyes fell on Fujin. She instantly became annoyed and asked, "Why do you keep running away and sneak attacking?" Fujin shrugged and replied, "It's fun." Hoka and Miko's faces immediately became dark. Renjiro's clone flickered in. He looked at his 3 students proudly and praised them, "Great work. Though he was a bit exhausted after fighting me, you 3 managed to kill a full-fledged jounin." All 3 looked at him. Hoka asked, "Should we reinforce you, sensei?" Before the clone could answer, they heard from behind, "No need." Immediately the 3 turned around to see Renjiro. Renjiro finally managed to kill his opponent. He sealed his body and was coming to help his clone when the trio killed Junji. Renjiro's clone dispelled himself. Renjiro received all his memories. He looked at his students and said, "Good work. Did you store their bodies?" His students all shook their heads. Renjiro said, "Store their bodies and assemble back here within 2 minutes. Fujin, bring Hotaka as well. Also, don't steal their belongings. For missions that particularly state to kill some ninjas, you shouldn't steal their belongings as they may have something that the village needs. Also, their belongings could have traps." The trio nodded and flickered. They went to their own battlefields and sealed the dead bodies in the scrolls. Fujin flickered towards Hotaka and looked at him. Both he and his dog were wrapped in multiple bandages. Hotaka looked at Fujin and asked, "Is it over?" Fujin nodded, "All enemies are dead." Hotaka was surprised. He thought, "I just asked for formality." They managed to kill a team of 6 ninjas who we couldn't pin down for days in just 30 minutes. While Hotaka was lost in his thoughts, Fujin sealed Doi's body in a scroll. He asked, "Can you move?" Hotaka got up and replied, "Yes. None of my injuries was serious." Fujin nodded and said, "All right. Sensei has asked us to assemble. Follow me." Within a couple of minutes, everyone was assembled where Renjiro was within a couple of minutes. Renjiro had sealed Junji's body. Renjiro looked at everyone and said, "Report your status." Miko replied, "No injury. Chakra around 15%. Hoka said, "No injury. Chakra around 25%. Fujin said, "No injury. Chakra around 40%. Hotaka wasn't aware of the protocol in Team Renjiro. However, on hearing the 3 Chunins, he understood and said, "Minor injuries. Chakra around 35%. Renjiro nodded and said, "Get ready. We will be attacking the second team from Kiri as well." The trio were surprised. Fujin asked, "Sensei, wouldn't it be better to rest and recover our chakra first?" Both Miko and Hoka agreed with Fujin but didn't say anything. Renjiro answered, "Normally yes. but our enemies would run away. And we are in the land of fire, so our reinforcements will be coming soon. Unfortunately, we can't wait for them. Without explaining the exact details, Renjiro flickered. His students immediately followed him. Hotaka was dumbfounded once again at how suddenly they disappeared. He immediately followed their sense. Renjiro arrived at the place where the pond that the Kiri ninjas were hiding in was. Fujin, Miko, and Hoka reached there soon after. Hotaka was the last one to reach. They were standing on the opposite end of the pond. Miko asked, "Why are we back here, sensei?" Renjiro smiled and asked, "When multiple parties are hunting you, what do you think is the best place to hide?" The four fell into thought. Hotaka had a few guesses, but he didn't answer as he assumed that the question was meant for Renjiro's students. After a minute, Miko answered, "At a place where no one will expect you to." Fujin and Hoka gave her a deadpan expressions. Hoka taunted, "Good way to state the obvious." Renjiro chuckled and said, "Well, she isn't wrong." In this scenario, where they were hunted by one stronger squad which was, in turn, being hunted by multiple other squads, the best place to hide is near the first squad that was hunting them. Hearing that, the eyes of all three students widened. They immediately activated their sensory skills. However, they didn't sense anyone nearby. Renjiro continued, "It is ingenious. The ones that are hunting them would never imagine them to be so close. And since this is their hiding spot, it would mean that they are confident about hiding here from others. So they would be hidden from everyone. Even in the scenario where the hiding spot of the ones who are hunting them gets exposed, the other party would attack them and not think that there is another squad hiding here." Fujin asked, "So, how did you sense them, sensei?" Renjiro chuckled and said, "I am very sensitive to earth and water nature. When I used the rampart of flowing soil jutsu, I sensed another underground cave that would be perfect for hiding. And since the patrol teams didn't manage to find them again, it became easy to guess who was hiding there." Renjiro began making hand signs, but Fujin said, "Wait a bit, sensei. I sense a few chakra signatures to our left." Hoka activated his Byakugan. Renjiro stopped and asked, "How many?" Fujin answered, "Fortune and leave. Another 3 are coming here as well. All 7 are at Chunin level." Hoka added, "All are from our patrol teams." Renjiro waited. Soon 7 Chunins reached them. On reaching, one of them said, "We heard a lot of noise coming from this area. So we came to reinforce you." Renjiro nodded and answered, "One of the Kiri squads has been dealt with. We will now deal with the other. 3 of you wait here with us. The remaining 4 go and hide. Hotaka, go with them." They nodded. The first patrol team of 4 dispersed in different directions and hid themselves. So did Hotaka. The remaining 3 waited with Renjiro's team, wondering what he was up to. Renjiro made a few hand signs and slammed his hands on the ground and said softly, "Earth release, 1,000 needles jutsu." A half hour ago, Sakaijo and her squad suddenly felt tremors inside the underground cave they were hiding in. Unlike Kazuki's squad, this squad was relatively younger. Only Jo was in her 30s. The remaining 3 members were in their late teens. Jo looked at her squad members and said, "Looks like Kazuki and others have been discovered by the Konoha shinobis. Don't try to sense them." Her squad nodded. Mino Mizuyo, who was a special jounin, asked, "Jo-sama, wouldn't it be better if we help those Konoha shinobi? That way, we can eliminate that squad from the Mizukage faction." Terumi Hanzo, a chunin in this 4-man squad, added, "It may even help us create a good relationship with Konoha." With those guys dead and Konoha being friendly, we will be able to return without any obstruction. However, Jo shook her head. She said, we don't know if the Konoha team is strong enough to kill them. If they aren't and Kazuki and others end up escaping, then we will be in a tough spot. That's not even considering that the Konoha shinobis might consider us enemies too and we may end up helping Kazuki escape. We will be in a much tougher spot. Mizuyo asked softly, but your niece recently fought in the Konoha's Chunin exams. I heard she reached finals as well. Can't we say that to at least enter into talks with Konoha? Jo answered, I had thought about this too. But ultimately, Konoha didn't agree to help us. Even if I say that I am afraid Konoha will ask us to surrender and take us as prisoners. They might let us go later due to what you said, but things won't be under our control. The expressions of everyone grew grim upon hearing Jo. After some time, their last member who was a Chunin, Kankyusha Shunji said, what if we just take this opportunity to run away? Jo replied, if they were able to find Kazuki's squad who were hiding so well, we will be exposed as soon as we leave this hideout. Don't worry so much. I don't think they will find our spot. So we will try to leave silently after a few days. Having no choice, they just waited in the hideout. After the first tremor, nothing else was felt in the hideout, so they assumed that the fighting spot moved. Chapter 123, Sneak Attacks. After half an hour, Jo and Mizuyo suddenly got alert. Hundreds of small needle-like spikes suddenly began forming on the cave walls. Understanding the danger, they both immediately made hand signs. Water Sphere Barrier Jutsu. Water Sphere Barrier Jutsu. Immediately, 2 layers of water dome barrier surrounded them. The outer layer was formed by Jo while the inner layer was formed by Mizuyo. Some water also flowed on the ground inside the dome. Hundreds of rock needles rained on the 2 barriers. Many needles managed to pierce through both barriers. Hanzo and Shunji stepped in front of Jo and Mizuyo and defended with kunous. They managed to deflect most, but a few needles still stabbed all of them. However, none were fatal injuries. Jo and Mizuyo desperately poured more chakra into their jutsus. Hanzo and Shunji too made hand signs. Hanzo slammed his hands on the ground. 4 rock shields appeared around them. Shunji, on the other hand, released a spark that hit Mizuyo's water sphere barrier. Electricity began flowing through it. The electric current slowed down most of the needles that pierced through the first barrier and hit the second barrier, making them harmless. The 4 Kiri ninjas were finally relieved for a moment. However, at that very instant, a stone spear silently and quickly rose through the ground under Terumi Hanzo. His attention was focused on the needle rain and didn't notice the spear under him. The spear pierced his lower body, pierced through him, and exited through his head. He yelled in pain, but couldn't move. That startled his 3 teammates who turned to see him. They were horrified. Their teammate's body was skewered with an earth spear. Jo immediately yelled, "Jump and run to the exit." Both Mizuyo and Shunji jumped along with Jo. Earth spears formed under them as well and began moving towards them rapidly. All 3 kicked at the side of the spear to propel themselves towards the exit. Jo made a few hand signs, water prison jutsu. A water sphere encased all 3 of them as they left the protection of the double-layered water sphere jutsu. As they left the underground, the water sphere kept getting pelted with rock needles. A few pierced through, but their speed was greatly reduced due to the water. They managed to defend themselves with a kunao as they got out. When they left the hideout, Fujin, Hoka, and Miko sensed them. Sensing them rushing out, Fujin made a few hand signs and prepared vacuum bullet jutsu while thinking, 3 people. One has Jounin level chakra. One is Chunin level and the last might be an elite Chunin. Jounins are tough to kill, I'll target the elite Chunin. Soon, Sakai-jo led them out of the underground. They appeared around 20 meters from where Renjiro and the rest were standing. As soon as they appeared, Fujin shot a vacuum bullet at Mizuyo. Though they were in a lot of peril, Chu's water prison jutsu provided them with a sense of security. So despite expecting an attack as soon as they left, they expected themselves to at least put up a fight. However, right after leaving the underground, a vacuum bullet hit the water prison. It pierced into it with extreme ease and hit Mizuyo's heart accurately. She fell down dead with her eyes wide in disbelief. Jo and Shunji were shocked again. First Hanzo was killed unexpectedly and now Mizuyo. Even worse was the fact that Mizuyo was their only censor. Leaving the land of fire safely without her aid would be extremely difficult. Without giving them any time to grieve, Miko, Hoka, and the other 3 Chunins moved to attack them. Jo immediately spat out a lot of water, forming a water wall between them. The water wall stopped them. They were about to move around the wall, when Jo yelled loudly, "Stop! We surrender. We don't want to fight against Konoha." Hearing that, the 5 of them stopped. The water wall soon collapsed into the water. Before Renjiro could say anything, Jo spoke, "We were hunted by our Mizukage despite not committing any crime. While escaping, we accidentally entered the land of fire. We have no intention of fighting against you." Renjiro knew about the situation in the land of water. He nodded and asked, "All right. But why didn't you surrender earlier?" Jo answered, "We were afraid of being accused of being from the same group as the ones who were attacking us." Renjiro thought for a bit and said, "Okay. Turn around and raise your arms in the air. We will be arresting you for trespassing into the land of fire. If you're innocent, then Lord Hokage will meet you and make further decisions." Jo felt a bit odd by that command. This was her first time hearing something like this. Jo and Shunji turned around and raised their arms. As soon as they did it, Renjiro made a hand sign and slammed his hands on the ground. However, even before he slammed his hands, Jo grabbed Shunji and jumped. Immediately thick earth spears appeared below them. Fujin, Hoka, and Miko smirked. Fujin immediately fired another vacuum bullet at Shunji while he was in the air. Miko threw a few shurikens on both while Hoka attacked Jo with vacuum palm. Chu's main attention was on Renjiro and Fujin. As soon as Fujin shot the vacuum bullet, she pulled Shunji out of the way. However, the vacuum bullet was very fast. It sliced through the side of his abdomen and left a deep cut. While pulling Shunji, she herself got pulled towards him. This ensured that the vacuum palm didn't hit her heart. However, it still hit her right lung. She coughed blood while blocking Miko's shurikens. On landing on the ground, she looked viciously at Renjiro and yelled, "Renjiro, you bastard! Why did you attack us?" Renjiro snorted and replied, "Good job hiding your killing intent. Unfortunately, I can see your desire to kill us in your eyes." Renjiro suddenly became angry and shouted, "Do you think you can fool me?" As he shouted, he unleashed his killing intent. Shunji flinched on feeling it. Of course, Renjiro's anger was fake. He only talked so as to provide his students with enough time to prepare for another round of attack. None of his 3 students missed it. Fujin made hand signs for air bullet jutsu and flickered towards Jo and Shunji. Hoka and Miko too flickered. Fujin suddenly appeared to their left and shot 5 air bullets at Shunji and 2 at Jo. At such a close range, Joe couldn't perform ninjutsu in time to defend. While Shunji was still affected by Renjiro's killing intent, Joe immediately moved backwards and dragged Shunji with her. She dodged both bullets, but Shunji couldn't dodge two of them. One of them pierced his left thigh and the other pierced his right lung. Not giving them any opportunity to catch their breaths, Hoka appeared behind Joe and took his stance. 8 trigrams, 16 palms. He attacked her. At the same time, Miko flickered in front of them and threw multiple shurikens at Shunji in close range. The other 3 Chunins realized that they were being slow and came forward to attack too. Joe looked at Hoka with a grim face. He had already managed to hit her once. If he did again, then she would become an easy kill for Renjiro. She diverted all her attention to him and blocked his palms, not allowing even one to hit her. However, Shunji, who was injured, couldn't resist much. He got hit by multiple shurikens. After blocking Hoka, Joe pushed him behind and looked at Shunji. Unfortunately, what she saw didn't bring her any comfort. 5 shurikens were embedded in his body. Worse, Fujin was just next to him and swinging his sword at his neck. Chu's expression became fierce. She decided, "You want to kill him? All right, kill him. But I will skin all 3 of you." She made a hand sign. Hoka and Miko were about to press on their attack when they saw Fujin's chakra flowing through his sword. They immediately moved backwards. The 3 Chunins who were running towards them stopped on seeing them retreat. Joe also noticed it. But like the 3 Chunins, she assumed that they were retreating due to her preparing a jutsu. With just one target in front of her, Joe blew hot corrosive steam at both Fujin and Shunji. Boil release, solid fog jutsu. At the same time, Fujin's sword reached Shunji's neck and cut off his head. Joe watched with anger in her eyes. She wanted Fujin to scream in pain from that jutsu. However, her eyes widened. After Fujin cut Shunji's head, a flying sword slash formed in the air and rushed towards her. The flying slash was accompanied by winds that dispersed the steam. Joe recognized that it looked like the way samurais attacked. She immediately jumped. However, the distance between them was too small. The slash hit her legs slightly above her knees. Both her legs were severed. The winds around the slash created cuts all over her thighs and abdomen. Joe watched her severed legs with wide eyes. She couldn't believe how easily she got defeated. Chapter 124, Overkill. Hoka and Miko looked into each other's eyes. Though Fujin severed her legs, Joe was still alive. Their competitive spirits rose and both wanted the killing hit. They immediately moved towards Joe. Miko attacked with shurikens and kunaus with explosion tags while Hoka attacked with vacuum palm. Fujin noticed both his teammates and attacked too. He swung his sword vertically, sending a flying slash aiming at splitting her in two vertically. Renjiro, who was looking at his students with pride, was suddenly dumbfounded. He thought in his mind, she has already lost her legs. We can capture her and get information from her. Why do you want to kill her so badly? The 8 other Chunins who were looking were also dumbfounded at how aggressive the 3 kids were. Joe also watched with wide eyes. She may have lost her team and her legs, but she didn't want to die. She made a few hand signs quickly. She encased herself within the water prison jutsu. Hoka's attack reached first. It pierced into the water prison. But Joe moved backwards within the water prison and the attack passed harmlessly through the water prison. Miko's attacks hit next. The shurikens were blocked by the water, but the explosion created some disturbances. However, the water prison jutsu still held. Fujin slash arrived last. It easily cut the water prison in two. However, Joe moved to one side of the water prison to avoid getting hit. The winds accompanying the slash were also dulled by the water. However, the slash finally dispelled the water prison jutsu. Joe fell on the ground in a bad way. Despite her horrible state, she still got up with the help of her hands. Fujin, Hoka, and Miko were about to make a move when Renjiro flickered right behind her. He hit the back of her head and knocked her unconscious. He looked at his students and said, "If you can take them hostage, in a convenient situation, do that. Don't go for the kill just for being competitive." That immediately made his students feel embarrassed. They didn't reply and moved forward. The 5 Chunins who were hiding also came out as the fight was over. The 7 Chunins who arrived later felt a bit embarrassed as they didn't contribute anything. Most of the work was done by kids less than half their age. Only Hotaka smiled thinking, now they will know how I felt. They all observed Jo. She was lying unconscious on her front side. Her legs were severed. They were bleeding a lot. There were many cuts on her thighs and abdomen. Her clothes were almost non-existent. Renjiro opened a scroll and summoned a seal from it. He put the seal on Chu's back and made a hand sign. The seal immediately spread on her entire body. Fujin looked at it and asked, "Is this chakra suppression seal?" Renjiro nodded and said, "Yes. When she wakes up, she won't be able to access her chakra until I or a seal master removes it." Fujin saw Chu's chakra getting sealed while thinking, I thought only Jiraiya made these for Naruto. I guess he just made an advanced one as normal ones might not work on Jinchurikis. Renjiro looked at the patrol teams and asked, "Are any of you a medical ninja?" A ninja stepped forward and said, "Yes, I can use mystical palm jutsu." Renjiro moved aside and said, "Stop her bleeding." The medical ninja moved forward and used mystical palm jutsu on her wounds. Since there were a lot of cuts on her body, he needed quite some time to heal her. After stopping the bleeding, he bandaged her body. While he was healing her, Miko asked Renjiro, "Sensei, since we aren't injured, we can undertake the next part of the mission too, right?" Hoka and Fujin immediately looked at Renjiro. Renjiro nodded and said, "Yes. We will take a rest tomorrow to recover our chakra. Then we will move towards the land of hot water on the day after tomorrow." Miko grinned on hearing that. Most Chunins never get to go on a rank A mission. However, she would have 3 under her belt. Hoka and Fujin smiled as well. Fighting against real ninjas was a lot more fun as compared to bandits. Renjiro looked at his happy students and said, "For now, store their bodies." They nodded and stored the bodies of the 3 dead ninjas. After storing, they handed all the scrolls to Renjiro, who stored them all in one single scroll. After the medical ninja was done healing Jo, Renjiro asked, "How long will she be out?" The medical ninja thought for a bit and replied, "She has lost a lot of blood. She will be out for at least a few hours." Renjiro thought for a bit and said, "All right. Carry her to the command outpost. We will come along with you." He nodded and lifted Jo and put her on his back. The 12 Konoha ninjas ran back towards the outpost where they met Akimichi Seiki. On reaching the outpost, Renjiro looked at one of the Chunins and said, "Call Seiki back here." The Chunin nodded and left. Renjiro looked at the medical ninja who was carrying Jo and said, "Restrain her to a chair. And gag her so that she doesn't try to kill herself by biting her tongue." The medical ninja nodded and entered the outpost. After a few minutes, Seiki returned to the outpost as well along with 3 other ninjas. Seiki looked at Renjiro thinking, why are they back so quickly? He looked at Renjiro and asked, Did you find any of them? Renjiro nodded and replied, yes. Both intruding squads have been dealt with. The one with the 6 members is all dead. And we took the commanding Jounin from the 2nd squad as a prisoner. The remaining are dead. Siaki was shocked on hearing that. An Inyazuka-chinin standing behind him blurted in disbelief, no way. We have been hunting them for over 2 days and didn't manage to do anything at all. How did you neutralize them in under 2 hours? Renjiro and his students glared at the Chinin who said that. Realizing his mistake, he quickly said, apologies, I didn't mean that. Renjiro ignored him. Siaki looked at his subordinate and thought, what he said was improper. Except, I was going to say the same thing. I can understand Renjiro annihilating one squad. But how were both neutralized so soon? Renjiro smirked, noticing his former teammate's expression. He handed him a scroll and said, it contains the dead bodies of those 9 ninjas. The last one is restrained inside. Siaki sighed and took the scroll. He said in a defeated tone, even at this age you continue to surprise me. Renjiro laughed and replied, well, in this case, it was mostly my students. Anyways, my students are tired. Can you make sleeping arrangements for them? Siaki nodded and looked at one of his subordinates. The subordinate immediately made sleeping arrangements for the trio. Fujin, Hoka, and Miko all ate a few ration bars and fell asleep. They had rushed a long distance and fought 2 battles on the same day. Chapter 125, Exploring the Patrol Outpost. While his students went to sleep, Renjiro decided to catch up with his old friend. He and Siaki chatted for a long while, recalling their old memories and sharing their new ones. After chatting, Renjiro made a report and attached it to a messenger hawk. The hawk flew towards Konoha. After a long sleep, the trio woke up. They freshened up and met up with Renjiro, who was having breakfast with Siaki. Siaki looked at them and said, come join in. Having learned a lot about them from Renjiro, Siaki had a much better impression of them. The trio didn't engage in any formalities and joined them. However, on seeing the food on the table, all 3 had the same thought, how the heck is this a breakfast? The entire table was filled with roasted meat. Fujin grabbed one slice and ate it. His expression immediately changed, fuck. This is so good. He ignored everyone and began eating rapidly. Hoka and Miko looked at Fujin and grabbed a bite too. They too began eating quickly but paid attention to their manners. Siaki laughed lightly on seeing them all eat quickly and said, no need to hurry. The food isn't going to run away. All 3 nodded. Siaki smiled on seeing them nod obediently. However, soon he was speechless. All 3 kids ignored his advice and kept eating at the same speed. Renjiro chuckled at Siaki's reaction. Fujin meanwhile thought, and Akimichi saying the food won't run away. As if anyone would believe that. After eating, Fujin asked, what do we do today, sensei? Renjiro replied, just rest. Take a tour of the patrol outposts and go on patrols if you get bored. It'll be helpful if in the future you get posted for patrol duties. Don't waste your chakra though. We need to leave tomorrow morning. Fujin replied, oh, alright sensei. He thought, I never thought about the ninjas who are out for patrol. I wonder how many ninjas are deployed like this. After thinking a bit, he concluded, probably not a lot considering the vast number of bandits in this country. The job seems boring, though it could be a good way to explore this country. Siaki called for Hotaka, who arrived soon. He said, since you guys fought together yesterday, I'll leave you guys under his care. Hotaka, show them the outpost and how patrol teams work. Hotaka replied, sure Siaki-sama. He looked at the trio and said, come with me. Fujin, Miko, and Hoka followed him. As Hotaka showed them around, Hiruzen read the report sent by Renjiro. A worry formed on his face as he analyzed, the civil war inside Kiri is spilling into other countries. There might be more such incidents in the future. I should deploy some Umbu squads along the coastline. He looked at an Umbu ninja hiding in his office. Realizing that the Hokage needed him, he appeared in front of Hiruzen. Hiruzen commanded, call Hound and his Umbu squad. The Umbu ninja nodded and flickered. Hotaka led the trio around the patrol outpost. He said, this is the command outpost for Konoha's eastern borders. This is why it is so big and well maintained. There are many smaller outposts all over the country. But they only have the basic facilities. Fujin thought, no wonder. This outpost is big. I only expected there to be one house at maximum. Hotaka showed them around the important locations in the outpost and introduced them to some of his friends. In the end, they climbed on a watchtower. On reaching the top, the trio admired the scenery around them. The houses in the outpost were arranged symmetrically. And it was surrounded by lush green forests. To add to it, the sun had just begun rising. So rays of sunlight traveled right above the trees. Fujin, Miko, and Hoka felt incredible calmness on seeing this sight. Fujin thought, what a sight. Perhaps, after the whole Kagaya mess is over, I should tour this world. I wonder what exists in this world apart from the hidden villages. Seeing the three kids lost in the scenery, Hotaka smiled and didn't say anything. After some time, they stopped looking at it. Miko said, I didn't think we would get to see such a beautiful sight in a patrol outpost. Hoka added, yeah, this feels wonderful. Fujin nodded. Hotaka laughed and said, such sceneries are the main reason why most here have taken patrolling tasks. Beautiful scenery, freedom from daily worries at home and lax responsibilities are the plus points of this job. Situations like yesterday are rare in peacetime. Usually, we just go on routine patrols without finding any disturbances. Fujin looked at Hotaka and wondered, so how did so many ninja cross into the land of fire during our last mission? Did the patrol teams just do a terrible job or were some of them bribed? There is another possibility. Did Konoha purposefully let them in so that they could be annihilated without any opportunity to run? Hoka asked Hotaka, can you take us to patrol? Hoka wanted to know as many of his seniors and elders from the Hyuga clan often undertook patrol missions. Hotaka nodded, sure. Let's go. He jumped off the watchtower. Hoka, Miko, and Fujin followed him. They left the outpost and entered the forests. And ran on tree branches at moderate speeds. Hotaka said, I am just taking you on a random patrolling mission. Usually, all patrol teams have set routes that they have to patrol daily. And there are a few teams that patrol randomly to guard against someone who might know our patrol routes and uses that to avoid us. Hoka said, that's smart. That will make hiding very difficult. Hotaka nodded and added, in addition, every patrol team has one ninja from Inyazuka, Hyuga, or Abarame clans. So our range is much larger and any intruder has to consider all aspects if they want to hide from us. The trio nodded. They were aware of the specialties of each clan. Hotaka took them on a 2-hour-long patrol. Fujin and Hoka used their abilities to help Hotaka on the patrol mission. But they didn't find anything out of the ordinary. They returned back to the outpost. Not having anything to do, They spent their remaining day meditating. During lunch and breakfast, they interacted with others in the outpost. In the evening, an Umbu squad entered the outpost. They entered the main building. Renjiro and Siaki were playing shogi. They both turned to see four Umbu ninjas. The leader of the four had silver hair and wore a kitsune mask. Both realized who the Umbu captain was.